welcome to the podcast. I am Joel Malm here with my dad.
I am Rick, and we just can't believe that you keep coming back to listen to these.
I enjoy doing these, so
we're having a great time.
I always tell Dad, you know what? If nobody listens, I don't care. I like hanging out with Dad.
We're having a lot of fun.
Yeah, and does that mean we love the sound of our voice too much?
That's probably it.
I don't know. Hey, so Dad, today I want to talk about something that used to drive me crazy about you.
Really?
Yeah. So I am. If you don't know me, you haven't personally been around me, apparently I'm pretty aggressive. I've been told I've been pretty aggressive.
Really?
Yeah, which people complain about it until I'm aggressive for them. And then they're like, I love your aggression, right? When I push something through for them, my wife's always like, you're so aggressive. And then I push something through for her. She's like, I'm so glad you're so aggressive. Yes. But you are the total opposite. So when I see something coming at me that's a potential threat, I'm like, I must go for the jugular and eliminate the threat, right? Uh-huh. You have a very different philosophy, and I've watched this throughout our lives, that you kind of have a philosophy of don't just do something, wait there. And I'm like, don't just wait there, do something. So we're very opposite of that. It seems to have worked out all right for you.
Thus far, I've survived,
It maybe, So where does that come from? Is that intentional? I think some of it's your personality, because you are that, again,
Yeah.
We keep going back to these Enneagrams, but in all the episodes we keep talking about Enneagrams, but you're an Enneagram 9, and you're also a very unique personality in the Myers-Briggs, that it's the ISFP, which is a very unique personality. So is it a spiritual thing? Is it a personality thing? Is it a combination of both? Is it a function of how your personality works for your spirituality, or your spirituality works for your personality?
I think.
And what does Jesus say? There we go.
I think, what would Jesus do? He'd do the exact same thing I did. He's watching me. He wants to know, what would Rick do in this situation?
I don't know.
I think initially it was probably personality, but I have tried to develop it too. And by personality, my personality is to just avoid, it's that, again, Enneagram 9. It's like, life, please don't bother me. I'm really happy alone here. I'm content, and just don't mess with me. But I have seen that, again, I've tried to model my life after what I see in Jesus, and I see in Jesus the fact that he just didn't get flustered. He didn't get ruffled too much. And so I go, okay, well, that's good. I want to keep that. Mm-hmm. But there were times when he too would be aggressive and stand up. And so I go, okay, well, I know I need to develop more of that in my life, and knowing the difference. And, this is totally off topic maybe, but what I saw the difference in Jesus is this. When he would get aggressive, it really didn't have to do with him. When he was being attacked, he just took it. You say this, and the trial there with Pilate and all that. He just remained like a lamb going to slaughter. He was quiet. When he got really aggressive was in 2 times. One, when the poor or the defenseless were being misused. I mean, the time he got angry at the Pharisees, it says he asks them about, is it right? Here's a man who was lame or withered hand. I can't remember which. I think the withered hand. And he says, is it right? Is Sabbath? Is it right to do good on the Sabbath, or is it right to do evil on the Sabbath? And they didn't say anything because they knew he was getting ready to heal this guy. And he got angry with them because they were more concerned about the religious law than they were about compassion for this man. Mm-hmm. And so he got angry, not because they were saying anything to him, not because they were attacking him, but they showed no compassion for the poor.
I just looked it up. Is it Matthew 12:12? He says, oh, how much more value is a man than a sheep, so it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath.
And so he healed the man.
Yeah.
And he got angry because they had no compassion for the defenseless. And so I realized that's a time we need to get angry. Mm. And then he got angry in the
action.
temple.
So
to take action.
In this case, so to take action is when
but it says he was angry.
Right.
Now, the anger, that's also misunderstood today, but controlled anger, if some things don't make us angry, there's something wrong with us.
Right.
And I know anger's not the topic of this.
No, but it's the action element of it, which is what we're talking about. Don't just do something, wait there, or don't just wait there, do something.
And the other time he took action was in the temple when they were selling the sheep and the goats.
Yeah,
and that's a twofold thing. First of all, he says, my Father's house is to be a house of prayer for all nations. That's an important little phrase in there. Because what had happened is in the temple, there was an outer court that was set up for the Gentiles. Mm-hmm. Well, there was nothing that would draw Gentiles to Judaism at that time. It was all a bunch of rituals and legalism. So the Gentiles weren't coming to fill those spaces in, so they started using that to sell the sheep and the goats and all this stuff. And so when he drove out the money changers, it wasn't a matter of don't be selling books and CDs in the foyer of the church. It was a matter of you have blocked all nations from coming to the Lord. So he was driving it out to make room for the Gentiles.
Wow, I have never heard that.
I just made it up.
That's great.
No.
Wow.
Yeah. And so so what he was angry over was two things that people, again, it has to do with people keeping people away from God. That really upset him, that you are blocking the entrance. You're blocking the way for Gentiles. There's no place for Gentiles to come because you filled it up with money changers. And so those are the things that made him angry. So there are some things that we need to take action on.
And you would say that generally that's if people are being...
In defense of people.
In defense of people.
Particularly the weak, in defense of the powerless. If someone is keeping others away from the Lord, pushing, driving away, so yeah, what is it in Proverbs? I'm going to probably botch this one really bad, but it says if you see someone going to slaughter and you don't take action, then you're guilty.
So here's the challenge that I see though is, okay, for example, I feel like a lot of times people, when I was in 17 or 18, I was in a discipleship group and we did this book called Experiencing God by Henry Blackaby.
Right.
And one of the things he basically says is basically kind of your life motto is don't just do something, wait until you hear from the Lord about what to do. Now, I see that we live in a world where a lot of people feel like they need to do things and they come up with good things. For example, this is going to sound very, I may regret saying this, but I see a lot of churches that just come up with things to do to justify their existence. And they spread themselves so thin doing all sorts of things that when something really, that they could really do well comes up, they don't have the resources to do what they could really do well. So where's the line, do you think, between there's the idea of just do good. Wherever you see things that need to be done, do good. And then where do you find you need to wait until it's the right thing for you to do? Because the example in the book of Acts, they had this, we need to care for the orphans and widows. We need to preach the word. There's this conflict of time and they had to get together and they basically decided, they have this intense verse in there where it basically says, we decided, maybe I should get the exact verse, but they said, it was best for us to teach the word, so we assigned other people to do the feeding of the orphans and widows.
Which was important.
Which is important. Both are important.
Right.
But what I see a lot of times is people just doing a bunch of different things, and when their resources are needed to fully give to something that they're specifically uniquely qualified to do, they don't have the resources to do that. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah. And I think with churches sometimes it's out of desperation. We got to make something happen here. We need to make something happen here. And so therefore, well, this church did this. Let's try that.
Right.
And it made
a lot of people come to the church when they did that.
Yeah, it really helped. That church is really growing. So they do this. And they many times don't understand the principle. They're just trying to model a method of some kind.
Yeah. Like I've seen some churches, like they do really well ministering to a certain kind of people coming out of addiction, coming out of drugs and stuff. But some other church tries to do that and they just do it clunky and it's not...
Right.
And people get, it draws a certain number of people, but they never are able to really and sure, listen, I mean, people are always going to be impacted, right? You do anything. Our worst of effort, even our worst of effort, God's like, I'll throw them a bone and bless this. But there's certain things I think we're really specifically called to do. And sometimes we, rather than waiting around for God to reveal that one specific thing we're called to do, we feel like we need to justify our existence in the meantime.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. And I think some of that is desperation. Again, we've got to make something happen. We've got to be doing something. And a part of that is guilt too. People come to you and they go, well, how come our church isn't doing this? Mm-hmm. I remember a lady coming one time to our elders meeting. How come our church isn't, we've got a van sitting out there. Why aren't we going to the nursing home and picking people up?
Here's the keys.
That's what I told her. I said, well, that's an awesome idea. Here are the keys. Oh, no. Not me.
Someone else.
Well, that's why we're not doing it, because you're the one called to do it and you're not doing it. So
yeah.
So so sometimes we do it out of desperation and sometimes we're doing it out of guilt. I know people that are busy because, well, if I don't do it, nobody will, and we need a third grade teacher for Sunday school or whatever, or we need somebody to greet people at the door. And I'm really terrible at greeting, but, somebody needs to do it. And I remember a guy told me one time, he says, a lot of times the reason that 80% of the work in the church is done by 20% of the people, he says, is that 20% of the people's fault. Because the word goes out, hey, we need somebody to parking lot attendant, and then, Joe, who does everything, goes, well, okay, I guess I'll go ahead and do it. And so he steps up to do it. And there was little Billy over here who's kind of quiet and kind of timid, and he would have been great at that, but he was thinking, well, maybe I ought to do that. Maybe I ought to do it. And he's thinking, and he's waiting. He waits next week. Well, if they don't get anybody next week, and then it's announced that Bob's going to do it, so, oh, okay, well, I guess that wasn't for me,
I say that with worship leaders all the time. I'm like, if you have a hole in your worship team, make sure the hole is really clear. Like, do a Sunday without a drummer. Because if you bring in a drummer every week that you're hiring, somebody's like, well, I guess they got a drummer. Yeah. And there's a really good drummer in the audience that should be serving there. But they're like, you've hired a drummer to come in, paid him $50 or something.
Yeah.
Like, well, they've got a drummer.
So I guess it's not me.
When there's a gaping hole, people can see that there's a gaping hole that needs to be filled.
And a lot of times the people are a little more timid. That 80% are a little more timid too. So they're not going to just jump right in, because they've never done this before, and so they don't feel confident. So sometimes we just keep those things going out of desperation. We're just got to get something going, got to do something, got to get some momentum here, got to get something happening. And other times, sometimes it's out of guilt, either, and that can be as an organization, the guilt, or it can be as an individual or person.
Yeah, I was gonna say that seems to work its way out with individuals too. I think a lot of times we just stay so busy because we're like, well, everybody else around me is so busy. Mm-hmm. I guess I should be finding stuff to be busy with.
Yeah.
But
and you feel guilty if somebody says, so what do you do? Well, I'm a stay-at-home mom. Oh, really? You don't work?
Yeah. Right.
No, I just sit at home with 3 kids. And
stay-at-home mom is, oh my gosh. When I'm a stay-at-home dad, I'm like, oh my goodness, how do mothers do this?
How do they do this? Yeah,
it's exactly. It takes a calling right there.
Yeah.
So the idea that, here's a thought. I've heard some people say that there are certain people that they're created for one moment in time.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of times you see that in a lot of guys in the Bible. You just see they were created for a very specific moment. And in the meantime, so say you're one of those people that you're just like, I have just not found what I'm supposed to be doing with life. What do you do in that? We've done a podcast before on the meantime. Actually, I think that's the most listened to podcast of ours. One of the top 2 or 3 is what to do in the meantime. So I think a lot of us feel this idea that, man, I'm right now, I don't know exactly what my calling is, but so what do you do to stay? You got to do something with your time, but how do you make sure that you're using it in the best way? Because also the other option is not just burying the talent, right? So it's I didn't know what to do with it, so I just buried it.
Well, there's a principle that whenever God has a big job to accomplish, He always chooses someone who's busy being faithful with a small job. And you see that with David. What was David doing when he was anointed as king before they pulled him back in? He was out in the field watching the sheep. Small job, but he was being faithful at it. What was Elisha doing? He was out with his plowing his dad's field with the other servants, just working with the servants in the field. What were the disciples doing? Matthew was at his tax collecting booth. Peter and John and James were out, were out fishing and fixing their nets. And Andrew, one of them, was it Andrew? I think he was sleeping under a tree or something. He was a busy guy.
There's a place for everyone in the kingdom.
Yeah. I think he was trying to discover the theory of gravity, waiting for an apple to hit him on the head there. Yeah. So all these, they were busy doing something. They were busy just being faithful in a small job. And of course, Jesus said, if you're not faithful in that which is small, who's going to give you a large thing to do? And so what do you do if you haven't found that moment in time? You're just faithful at whatsoever your hands find to do it with all your might. Just do it. Just do it. And then there's another, Paul wrote to the Thessalonians and he said this, he says, hey, just lead a quiet life, work with your hands, provide for your family. Just do those things. It's like Gideon. He was just out there minding his own business, trying to hide out from the Midianites, threshing the wheat, trying to provide for his family. And boom, when the time came, God knew where to find him.
Yeah, that reminds me of what you always used to tell me. You would say, you just need to wait on the Lord. And I'm like, I'm tired of waiting. And then you said, no, it's not waiting, sitting still. It's waiting like a waiter. What does a waiter do? He's always looking up. That cup needs to be filled over there. Oh, that table needs to be cleared. A waiter that's just sitting still would probably get fired pretty quickly. Right, you always told me that, and that stuck with me. Wait like a waiter does. It's not sitting still. It's actively finding what to do. So
serving people in the meantime.
So where's the balance between that and just justifying your existence by finding things to do? Like, how do you need to like seek God's, like, Lord, am I supposed to reach out to this person and help this person? Or is that something that somebody else is supposed to do? Where's the balance in that? Because I think we could always find things to keep ourselves so busy that when...
Yeah, but if you go back to the waiter illustration, it's like, okay, I've got 5 tables I'm responsible for. Okay, they've got everything. Well, let me go back and wash dishes.
Yeah, it's the what you're responsible for.
Yeah. It's keeping your eye on the areas that you have a responsibility in, and then just making sure that those are taken care of. And that'll probably keep you busy enough.
Yeah. That's a good point. So with the idea of don't just wait, or that's my motto. Don't just wait, sit there. What about the idea?
Just do something, stand there.
What about the idea of a wise man sees trouble coming and takes shelter? A prudent man. In Proverbs it says that. There's a danger of, if you wait too long, you've made a decision.
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah. And I don't think we're talking about, here's what, when I say you're waiting, what you're waiting for is I've kind of adopted the phrase, I've tried to use, I'm waiting to hear. So I'm not just waiting until everything falls apart, but I'm trusting that God knows when I need to know what I need to do. And if I have no idea, I could be throwing darts in all different directions and maybe I'd hit the right thing, but probably not, because I find that God's ways are typically counterintuitive to our ways, the exact opposite of our ways. And so therefore, if I will give it time, if I will give it some quiet enough, I will probably hear something at the time I need to know it that I wouldn't even have thought of.
Yeah.
And so it'll be something, wow, and you usually, at least in my experience, I usually know that's him because I go, man, that just makes so much sense. But that would have never entered my brain. And so you're not just waiting, hoping the problem goes away, although I do have a tendency to do that too.
Right.
And I found many of them do. Hey, it solves itself, worked itself out. Actually, usually somebody else solved it. It's the old, there's no free lunch. Somebody paid the price to solve that problem. It just wasn't me. And that's not good if it was my responsibility. But it's really a matter of, okay, I'm waiting until I know the direction I should go. So I'm not just doing something so that I'm doing something.
Right, which is what Blackaby talks about in Experiencing God. He says that churches need to spend time praying and hearing from God on what they're specifically supposed to call to do, rather than just coming up with stuff to do for God.
Yeah, because it'll have, and here's the thing, is kind of that story with Martin Luther, where he says, he said, I have so much to do today that I dare not start the day without 3 hours in prayer. Mm-hmm. Realizing that if I spend time with the Lord, I'm going to get traction on the stuff I do, rather than just, spinning my wheels in the mud and sliding all over the place. If I just get some clear direction and follow that direction, then I'll get traction on what I do, and everything I do will be, I will be more effective. I've kind of found that the Lord can kind of compress. Mm-hmm. If you're faithful to him and faithful to spend time with him and to hear from him. I've had that happen many times where it's like, wow, I got a lot to do, but I really am going to be faithful in this area. And then boom, you're out and you meet somebody that you were going to have to call and talk to them, and in 30 seconds you've solved the problem. And you bump into somebody over here, and there's this thing happens, and then something comes in the mail that solved that problem. And it's amazing how, if we will let God orchestrate our steps, how he will step in and make it all just kind of harmonize and work together. And it's an act of faith on our part to do that.
That kind of fits in with the Isaiah 40:31, that those who wait for the Lord will renew their strength. They'll mount with wings like eagles. It's almost like, as you're waiting on the Lord to blow in your direction, all you've got to do is kind of expand your wings. And when you don't have to create a lot of energy if you've waited on his timing. Because I've done a lot of things on my own where I didn't wait for the Lord, and I'm like, this would be a good thing to do. And I did it, and I got tired of flapping my wings. Yeah. But I love that, the way, the picture of it in Isaiah 40, it says, if you wait on the Lord, you'll renew your strength. Basically, it's like, and it says you'll rise, they'll run and not grow weary, they'll walk and not be faint. It's like, when you wait on the Lord, if you just keep your wings outstretched, and his wind blows he blows in your direction, that's going to blow you further than you could ever do on your own. Yeah. You just soar on it. Yeah. But here's what's frustrating is sometimes you wait a long time for those gusts.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. You probably don't remember this, because when you were really little, maybe 3-4 years old, maybe even younger than that, we had a little sailboat, little dolphin.
I vaguely remember having that.
Yeah. And so this is when we were in Corpus Christi, and there's almost always a wind blowing
Yes,
there.
there is a perpetual wind.
A really good wind. So
and it's not a breeze; it's a wind.
It's a wind. Yeah. So the key there is not to be blown to China when you're out sailing. But we would have this little boat, and I remember that illustration coming to me one time. What do you do? You're waiting on the breath of God to come, and the wind of God, and the power of God, and the move of God, or something to happen. And I thought, what do you do when that's not happening? And I thought, what do you do when you're sailing? Well, you at least set your sail to catch whatever wind there is, and then you're ready to go when the wind does come. And so what do you do when just nothing's happening? You set your sail in the right direction. You do what you can do to be prepared for it, but you don't. And you could sit there and you could grab you an oar and you could paddle and yeah, you'll make some progress, but you're really going to be tired, and you're just going to make up for it in just moments once just the breath of God, as you say, the one touch of the favor of God is going to shoot you way past what you could have paddled for hours and hours. But if you're bored, go ahead and paddle. It won't hurt.
Yeah, just don't be. I guess just don't get mad at God when that's a challenge for me. That's a challenge for me. I'm like, God, why didn't you bless what I was doing for you?
Yeah,
and sometimes He will. Sometimes He's super gracious, but a lot of times you're just like, this did not. God didn't come behind me on this. Well, maybe you got ahead of God and like you aren't. I mean, there's a very real. I just see a lot of people that are angry at God because they set out to do something, and I would prone to have this happen to me too. Is you set out to do something in your own strength, and because you didn't wait, but then I've also seen other times where it's like when God decides to move, it's so fast and so forceful. I just literally have to hold on.
That's why you got to have the sail set.
Yes,
and be ready.
Like I meet the one right person, and in a matter of weeks, click, 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 click. He's making connections that I couldn't have made in 10. Well, I tried in 10 years. And that's what's so fascinating about it. And I guess that's just God trying to keep us humble. And that's where He says, hey, wait on me. Let me guide you. Because man, you can do stuff on your own strength. And man, some of us are really like me. I'm a pretty aggressive person. I can get a lot of stuff done just by the sheer force of my personality. Now, does it hold up and last?
Yeah.
Typically not. And usually I get a lot really tired in the meantime. And then I get angry that God's not making it easier for me. And He's saying, hey man, well, like, that's the thing. Like, so if you're rowing your boat on your own, that's fine. Just don't get mad at God when you're not going as fast as you. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're just bored, go ahead.
And for heaven's sake, don't row in the wrong direction that you want to go.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's I guess anyway, in Corinthians, it talks about how there will be a judgment when we stand before the Lord. And it talks about like the fire of His eyes will examine our works. Mm-hmm. And it talks about they will be burned up, that which is wood, hay, and stubble. But what will be left will be gold and silver and precious stones, precious jewels. And I've understood that in the context. What I understand that to be is like there's all this stuff that we do for God. Yeah. And that's the wood, hay, and stubble. And that will all be burned up. That will all be consumed. And what's going to be left are those things that we did in obedience to the Lord. And so, if you want to create a pile and have a nice big flame on that day, you can be busy doing all this stuff, But you want to make sure that you're doing those things that He has told you to do. And sometimes that does require waiting on the Lord. And sometimes it requires dealing with the guilt that people are going to put on you. And sometimes it requires
the guilt that you're not doing something when they say you should be.
Doing enough. You're not doing this, you're not doing that.
Or the guilt we put on ourselves that we're not doing enough.
That's true too.
Tyrannizing ourselves
Yeah. And again, in our culture, in our society, it is and in Christianity, Western Christianity, like in Buddhism, it's not that way. In many of these religions, it's you just sit and
you don't, and you're not too. You've got multiple lives to live, right?
Well, that's true too.
And if you got multiple lives to live, you do what you can on this life to get it. Yeah.
But the point is, they're not all accomplishing, and I think it's maybe today even more. It's like you gotta do, and it's all in the razzmatazz and getting everything moving fast. And it's not like with the Desert Fathers, where it's like, well, I'll eat my bread today and I'll pray, and tomorrow I'll eat some more bread and drink some more water and pray some more, and there's not that time of contemplation. Contemplation is it's almost scary to many in the church today, that you're going to actually stop and think
and wait on. Yeah. I was reading something recently about how people towards the end of their lives, like the last few days of their lives, they have these like surges of insight into their life. I remember Papa, Mom's dad, toward the end of his life, he had been kind of bedridden, and his whole life that was the thing he was most terrified of, is being immobilized and unable to move. He was very impatient, one of the things right now. And so he was crippled. And so that was always his greatest fear, is being stuck somewhere. He was stuck in a bed in the last 6-8 months of his life. And I remember him saying something to me. He said, Joel, God's taught me more laying on this bed in the last 6 months than I think I've learned my whole life. And it was that element of that. He was forced to wait on the Lord because there was nothing else he could do. And in that, he got all this insight and revelation that, you could sit around and wonder, what could he have done in his life if he had that insight before? But it is what it is, right? But you do wonder in our lives how much more could we actually get done in the long run if we were using our energy to, focus on hearing from the Lord. And then when he said, go, I'll be with you, I'm going to blow in your direction, then we go, rather than, again, like you say, fiercely paddling for days on end and then ending up where we could have gotten with one touch of his favor anyways. Yeah,
but how you even worded that question, how much more could we have gotten done? It kind of touches to the core of the problem there.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Because is it all about how much we do, or is it about our relationship with him and with others? And again, our culture is just on doing. How much can I get done? Well, okay, relationship's good if it's going to help me do more. It's going to help me be more effective.
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to be a more effective husband if I have a good relationship with my wife? If so, then I'll do this. But it's not doing it for a relationship. It's doing it so I'm more effective. It's doing it so I'm better. It's doing so I score higher on the good husband test or whatever, instead of, I really want to develop a relationship with this person,
which requires patience and waiting to be.
But no, and it's the same thing with the Lord. I really just want to develop a relationship with him so I can do more, so I can be more effective. So when I get up there, I can have more crowns or jewels in my crown. I don't know. Maybe that's not what the jewels are all about doing, because you just don't see him as a big doer.
It says he rewards those who seek him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
without faith, it's impossible to please God.
Doing good, but it reminds me of your friend David there, who said, well, this is kind of what Jesus did. He just kind of wandered around. He got up in the morning and, let's see what we're going to do today.
When I went and visited David in Acapulco, I was like, hey man, what do you do all day? Which, by the way, I've found is a horrible, don't ever ask a missionary what they do all day. That's a very offensive question to a missionary, but he's like, let me show you. And the next morning we get up to pull out the tools to build some things for the church. And a guy walks in, he's like, hey, can you help this widow? And so we spend all morning helping this lady rewire her house. Then we come back and have lunch. We try to get back to work. A kid comes in, he's struggling. We go pray for his family member. And by the time the day's over, I'm like, I guess you can show me tomorrow what you do. We got so many distractions today. And he's like,
nope.
No, man, that's my ministry. He's like, I just keep time available and wait on what the Lord brings in my path. Yeah.
In the meantime, I've got something in the background that I'm kind of working on. I may be painting the wall or doing this, but the distractions are the call of God today. And that, again, everything can be taken to an extreme, and that can be taken to an extreme too, because the other side of that is, in Ecclesiastes, I believe it is, it talks about casting your bread on the water. Because you asked earlier, well, how do I know if I should help this person? How should I know if to do this? And so when opportunities come, it's kind of casting your bread on the water. You never know. And that's a weird picture.
That is a weird picture. Like soggy, picture. You'll get your soggy bread back with mold on it.
I'm not sure I want that bread back. Just let it float away. But it's kind of that idea of sowing seed.
Yeah, and it will come back to you. And so you don't know where it's going to come back to. What God may have used as you were being a faithful servant, waiting on him.
Right.
What he may use down the line to get you, again, where you want to go, but ultimately where he wants for you. Because, I do believe God has an intended destination for us. The Bible says that,
but I do believe too that is adjustable, you might say, because when you say that, you made it think, oh, I screwed up my life, I'm off track, I'll never get to be where I was supposed to be. I'm only in the acceptable will of God.
Right.
No. any dad knows that, hey, this is what I'd like for my kids to be. But, as long as they're good and serving God, I mean, this is my heart anyway. It's like, I didn't care what your profession was. If you had a heart for God, if that was your number one passion, I didn't care what your profession was.
Right.
And so I had that goal, and that wasn't unchangeable. As far as if you wanted to be a doctor, who could have I don't even know what you do now, so I don't know what. Or Jonathan, I'm not sure what the world they do. Or Mike, my son-in-law, who knows what
he can't
does.
tell you. They'll have to kill you.
It's
Yeah.
all top secret. So I don't even know what any of you guys do. So I never could have said, well, I want you to be this. I just wanted you to be passionate servants of the Lord Jesus Christ. And that's come about. And so I'm good with that. And I think that's the way the Lord is too. If I have a relationship, he just wants a relationship with us. If I have a relationship with you, that's his goal for us, that we be conformed into the image of Christ. All the others just kind of fluff.
And that's where the active waiting comes in. As you're serving, he's showing you, waiting actively on him. He's showing you more and more of who he is and your walk with him, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If you liked what you heard, please consider sharing this with a friend. For more information, visit joelmalm.com or rickmalm.com. Thanks for listening.